Welcome to Season 2 of the Empower to Heal podcast. I'm your host, Dina Tipsherini, and I'm so excited to take you on a journey through the ups and downs of motherhood. Together, we are going to learn, prepare for, and unearth all things motherhood, because I believe that exposure and awareness can lead to empowerment. So buckle up for an unfiltered, raw, and insightful journey. Hello, and welcome back to the Empower to Heal podcast, Season 2, where we are talking about all things motherhood. And today we're leaning into the realm of parenthood. I am so excited to introduce my sweet, precious husband, Michael, to this podcast. He's been on some episodes with me in the past, and today I wanted to talk about relationships and how relationships change when you become a parent and you're in that newborn era and phase, and how your relationships are challenged in that phase of life and throughout the transition to toddlerhood and figuring out parenting. And I thought, what better way to talk about this than to invite the one and only Michael Tipsherini onto the podcast. Are you on the brink of parenthood, eagerly anticipating the arrival of your little one? Take a proactive step towards preparing for the whirlwind journey ahead by joining our waitlist for the Empowered First Year Postpartum Prep course. Designed with your needs in mind, this online 4-week program offers a comprehensive blend of education, skill building, and community support to guide you through the demanding postpartum season. Don't navigate this transformative time alone. Click the link in the show notes below to join our next cohort and embark on your journey to parenthood with confidence.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.
I'm so happy you're here. This is really unplanned. I asked him yesterday, hey, do you want to be on the podcast? And he's like, what? And I said, do you want to be on the podcast and talk about our relationship? And so this is going to be a candid discussion. And I really have to say, we have not had much opportunity for conversation lately. We've had a shift and change in how we are navigating this season of life with our little one. And that has looked like me falling asleep with my son and Michael taking him to his own bed in the middle of the night. And that means that our time in the evenings to actually talk and connect and what I call pillow talk, which is like me processing everything so I can fall asleep, that time is not there right now. And so we are not really in a season of groove, I guess, with our communication. And so you're going to get a candid discussion with us today, an exploration and just real insights. This isn't a space where we're going to hold information back. It's not a space where we're going to sugarcoat. We're going to tell you like it is because we know you need that and you want that. And it's helpful to hear someone be real and honest so that we can feel like we can relate to others in this season of life and hopefully get some guidance or insight that serves you on your journey. So, real and honest, hun.
Okay.
That's how we're going.
All right.
I think the first thing that I'm curious from your perspective is I speak on this podcast a lot about the postpartum season, as you know. And in that season, I really want parents to know that season for moms is a season of receiving. It's a season where you are shifting into you're providing and mothering for your baby while others are mothering and providing for you. And that can create a dynamic in a relationship that's like a stark, drastic change from, especially if this is your first child, from your partner being the center of your attention to now this infant and not having energy within yourself to give to your partner. And so what was that like for you when I was freshly postpartum in my feels? My body was wrecked. My emotions were a wreck all over the place. And yeah, I didn't meet your needs. I didn't have time to speak your love language.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's the partner in the situation who didn't have to just give birth to a baby. I think it's obviously much different. I think there's parts of you that feel maybe you do feel jealous, right? And then you feel guilty about feeling jealous of like, well, you kind of feel, do I feel neglected? And realistically, you understand that that's just the current situation, right? The baby requires and deserves all the attention it needs because it's brand new to the world, right? It's learning stuff. We're learning how to take care of a child. So I think that part was difficult, right? I think just adjusting, acclimating to kind of feeling like a, in the background kind of thing, right? Not necessarily like I took it personally, but it just kind of felt like
Mm.
that part of it is hard, right? Of um, you know, on one hand, that the intention is where it should be. On the other hand, you still kind of feel in the back of your mind of like kind of feel maybe left out of stuff, or just felt like, oh, I guess you said love language for me is like acts of service is we've kind of learned over time. And realistically that doesn't isn't gonna I don't want to say fly, but like it isn't gonna make sense in this situation.
Providing any act of service, that's for
Right,
sure.
but that's like, you're taking care of our son and that he deserved that attention. He still obviously deserves that attention. So it's just kind of,
Mm.
that part is just like the friction you might feel of a life-changing moment. Like everybody's gonna feel it at a different capacity. I think for me it was just trying to learn where do I fit into the new puzzle, right? Not that it's a bad thing, right? It's just a new puzzle, a new equation to like adjust and find how do I fit and help you as first of all and help Emery, our son, feel, you know, taken care of. And I think that was the adjustment for me for sure.
Yeah. So you mentioned the word jealousy,
Mhm.
and I don't think you're the only human who experiences that, right? And to me, jealousy comes up when we have an unmet need,
Mhm.
when we feel like our needs are going unnoticed or our services are going unappreciated, or we don't really feel seen, recognized, held, noticed, and we feel like we're kind of fading into the background. Is that what you mean by jealousy? And like, what did that look like for you when you felt jealous?
Yeah, yeah, I think I'm on the same page there. I think jealousy is, it's not maybe like not necessarily jealous of our son. It's just more like I feel like I'm kind of left out of the emotional capacity or the physical capacity with acts of service, that kind of thing, and you're feeling like you're kind of, you said, in the background is how it feels, right? You kind of
Mm.
feel maybe a disconnect of sorts, and maybe you're jealous of the connection more than anything else. Of like, there's now a living thing that requires attention and has needs that connection, and you kind of feel like, oh, again, like I said, kind of how do I fit into the equation? And then at that
So
moment
like,
in
what do
time,
I provide,
yeah,
right? Like, you're not breastfeeding. Like, is that
yeah,
the big piece of it? Is like this breastfeeding piece?
yeah, that was a big chunk of it, correct? Because I think we've talked on the podcast before that it was really hard for him to latch and to feed, and I think that part sucks. I feel like again, I couldn't change that. I remember that one moment in time of being like he needs to eat, and like I felt helpless, right? But that's not to make it like your fault or it was your problem, right? But just felt like I couldn't, as a person. I think it's I like to solve problems, and I feel like what could I do, right? I don't have the resources that he needed. You're his mother. You gave
Mhm.
birth to him. The connection is there, and I kind of feel like I was trying to find things I could do, right? And that's kind of the smaller things of whether it's going to work and making sure that's stable. That's the thing I could focus on, or the dog, whatever it might be, or like or getting random things like just things that you couldn't do, which is fine. But like that's like I had to latch on to those things to feel like I'm adding value. But the part that I wanted to add value on is like obviously taking care of our son. I think that was the hard part
Yeah.
of feeling like there's the core things I just as a the dad I could not provide. And I think again that you feel jealous, but it's not like a I don't know
Bad
bad jealous. It just
jealousy.
feels like I want to be involved and help and contribute kind of thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. I hear you talking about a theme as you're saying this, and that theme is like, how can I provide?
Hmm.
You identify with being a provider, right? You also identify, and correct me if I'm wrong or add to this, but you identify with being a protector,
Yeah.
and a soother.
Hmm.
Like, you have a very, like, for me and in our relationship, like, you bring me comfort, you bring me peace, you help me regulate my nervous system when I need assistance with that. Like, I co-regulate with you, right?
Hmm.
Like, you bring a sense of safety to the home. And as we bring our new little baby home and everything's brand new and it feels like there's like change and threats everywhere, especially when we struggled with the feeding journey,
Hmm.
it felt like there were threats everywhere. Like, you latched on to this theme of like, okay, how can I provide? If I can't provide the food, if I can't breastfeed,
No.
right? what can I do? If I can't solve this problem of what's going on because it's not my body, like how can I contribute to solving that? And you did that in really bright ways. Like you helped get us to the appointments and you spoke at appointments where I couldn't find my voice, where I was crying and overwhelmed. Like you would
Mm.
be the voice and you would share and reflect. When I like we had to do tongue tie and lip tie revisions. Our son had both a tongue tie and a lip tie. And we did one revision hoping that would solve the problem. And then a couple months later had to do the next revision. And you were the one who did the exercises for that. I
Hmm.
couldn't bring myself to do those. If you don't know about what this is, like the revision is like lasering of skin in their mouth that either ties their lip to like their gum line or their tongue to the bottom of their mouth. Um, and our son, those ties were so big that he couldn't like flange open his lips properly to get a good latch, and he couldn't use his tongue to express milk. Um, and so they laser that, and the healing process for that is a lot of exercises where you have to disrupt the healing. And so, multiple times a day, you have to go in and run your finger back and forth over the wound so it doesn't heal back shut. And I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that.
Right.
I couldn't like thinking about it makes me woozy. Like that was
Mm.
you. You had to provide that.
Yeah, and I think it kind of ties back to what we were talking about, where it felt like I was trying to figure out, well, how do I contribute? How do I help? And I think that was a situation where maybe I wasn't as comfortable doing it either, but it felt like if I didn't do it, then, all those hard situations and nights and times where you're trying to get him to feed and he's crying, and like we can have a potential solution for that if I can do something that's uncomfortable for me, but it helps you and it helps him. Like that was like I was excited, right? The next to a point, right? I feel like I can do something.
You
I can be
feel your
involved.
purpose.
Yeah, and so it wasn't fun, right? It still wasn't fun to have to do that because you feel guilty of,
So
of
hard.
kind of basically. I mean, it doesn't feel good, right? You don't want the skin to reconnect, so you're kind of constantly in there, doing it as gently as you can to keep them from reconnecting. But it's not easy for anybody, and especially for our son of having to, I don't know. It was tough. But like I said, at the end of the day, the motivation was feeling like here's a place where I can help him and I could help you and he
Yeah.
could make an improvement for both of you and your quality of life is kind of how I felt. So
So at what point did you feel like, and everybody's different. So I'm asking this not for you to see like a benchmark for yourself, but out of curiosity, at what point did you feel like your own needs were starting to be met again by me, your partner? Um, and what was that like for you?
I guess like my first gut reaction to that is I think once we started getting milk donated, I feel like that was a little bit of that. Like I felt like the focus was less on the fear of him having sustenance and being able to survive, and at least he had some sort of food. I wouldn't say it was like, an overnight thing, right? I think it was over time, it's gradual. I think back
Yeah.
to a moment in time. That's when I feel like when we felt the stress of, is he going to be okay? Is he going to be able to eat? We had a solution of sorts. We're making it work with whatever we could, whether it was, formula from Germany that we found that was the best he could have. That was okay for him to use, or if it was getting breast milk donated kind of thing. So I think,
So the feeding journey, I think, is a theme for the both of us.
mhm,
That was very difficult for us
yeah.
finding how to feed our son. And he's talking about donor milk because we did the tongue tie, lip tie revisions, we did physical therapy, we did oromyofascial therapy, we did craniosacral therapy, we did all of these different, we did lactation consultants, chiropractor, all of these things to help our son be able to nurse. And not just nurse, like if you're hearing this, you're probably like, well, why didn't you just give him a bottle? Well, he couldn't express milk from a bottle
Mm.
either. So our feeding journey started with what something's called spoon feeding and then syringe feeding. And then getting him to be able to drink from a certain kind of bottle while we continued to try and nurse. So we did something called triple feeding, where you try to nurse and then you pump and then you feed with a bottle. And it was a long journey. And so I exclusively pumped for a year, but I didn't make enough milk. And we were I say we, I don't know about you, but I was hell bent on breast milk
Mhm.
for him. And an angel where I worked told me about donors who donate breast milk. And we met this amazing woman who was feeding her child, another child, and basically our child with her milk. She had such a large supply. And then moms at his daycare that he was at learned about this and they started saving milk and giving us some frozen milk to support him in eating. And so the pressure shifted when we realized there were other sources for this. And then at 1 year, we started with formula,
Mhm.
um, which finding a formula for him was a journey as well.
Yeah.
Basically, mostly because of my requirements. I had a lot of requirements to support like what I wanted him to have as his brain's developing.
Mhm.
But how was that for you? Like some of these problems were like there was easier ways to solve them, but I definitely took the harder route. And that created stress on the whole family.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that comes into play throughout a relationship, and I don't think it's a negative of sorts. I think it's just something that maybe I'm used to. I think
Me being
I don't mean that. No, no, not to say that you're difficult, but I think like just your approach to things is much maybe more holistic or more focused on like the big picture, not just like what's the easiest thing to do to fix this problem,
okay.
which is like just give them some formula from the store kind of thing. And I appreciate that. Like, I think for me as a person who likes to research stuff, I could, it made sense to me on paper, right? In practice, it makes it, like you said, it makes it more difficult, makes it hard at times. But the goal or the intent from your side is always it's with the best intent, if that makes sense. So I'm not, it's not like I'm questioning or I get frustrated by it. It's more just like I understand that you're coming from a place of care and trying to find the best option and kind of thinking about it from more angles and just like how do we solve X kind of thing, which sometimes my brain does, right? How do I solve this problem? Oh, this is the answer. And maybe it's the easier one, it's straightforward, but it's not maybe the best one. And I think the formula is a good example of that of, there was easier options, but then we had to spend a whole bunch of time trying to find what we felt was the best option, which is, I mean, at the end of the day, like, you want to provide your child with the best opportunities, whether that's, learning, growing, or like the food they eat. I think that's a key moment in time, and I think it's easy to take that for granted, right? I'm not involved with kids up until that point. Really, I didn't interact with kids. I don't. My realm of knowledge is not kids, so I just took it from the perspective of like that's your point of not one point, but you have multiple points. But like it's a good point. You come from a place of experience and knowledge, is what I mean to say in that realm. So I would rather defer to you and say, okay, it's important enough for you to feel very strongly about it, then we should kind of pursue it.
I really appreciate that you make what's important to me important to you.
Mm.
Like that matters so much, especially when you're learning something. You're in this new season of life, you're exhausted, your skills are being challenged, right? Like the demand put upon you. You don't yet have the skills to meet that demand and you have to develop them.
Mhm.
And then you have a philosophy or a dream or a perspective of how it's going to go. And you do all of these things to achieve that perspective. So for me, it was cloth diapering and breastfed baby and holistic interventions, spacing out his immunizations so that his little system wasn't overwhelmed. He had reactions in the beginning, and so really being um, cautious around like what's going into his body and how much and when and how old he is. And I had all of these like, this is how it's going to be when I'm a mom, and this is how I want to do it, and we're going to prepare. And we did prepare in pregnancy, but nothing prepared us for what it was really like. And I just appreciate that you like made what's important to me important to you. And I think that's like a staple. Like the same goes both ways, right? Like believing in each other and supporting each other so that what one another is passionate about or like hell bent on is also important to the other.
Yeah.
I think it's important to bring up too that there's like this season in the postpartum first year where as a mom, especially when you're trying to nurse or you're pumping and your body is being touched or needed or pumped from every 2 hours, and then you're holding a baby constantly. Like there's this piece of you that gets touched out. And what was that like for you when I would get touched out? Do you remember those moments?
Yeah, I mean, I guess they made sense, right? I think I couldn't, again, like maybe from the perspective of like wanting to feel like I could add value, not add value, but like contribute, right? I feel like that he needed you, and I can only feel what it feel like to kind of all feel overwhelmed by that. I think that was hard. It's not easy to say, right? I think, you know, those moments where I wanted to be able to respond to him, and if I would respond to him, most of the time it would work, but there's times where like it just couldn't be me and it had to be you, but maybe you were touched out, and I that was like those are hard to navigate, right? Of how do you, I don't want to put the burden on you as the solution to the problem, but there's moments in time where it feels like no matter what I was doing, he was still upset or he was crying, right? And I think those are hard because I don't want him to cry, I don't want him to be
Yeah.
sad.
Well,
I,
what about when I was touched out, but you wanted my affection? Do you remember those moments?
I don't think I remember them. I wouldn't say vividly. No, I think they don't even stand out as like a negative to me, I guess I would say. I think maybe in retrospect because they make sense, right? I think I'd be able to put myself in your shoes of how I would feel, and maybe that's why they don't stand out as much. But I mean, I know there's moments in time where I can recall you feeling that way, but I don't feel like a sense of um I didn't feel jealousy in those moments. I didn't feel, sad or upset. I just felt, concern probably is probably the bigger feeling I feel like at those times. Cause, again, I try my best to put myself in your shoes in those moments. And that's easier said than done, right? I think it's easy to think you'll do that, but there's moments in time where you don't, right? You just feel like maybe I did feel frustrated, like I would like a hug or whatever it might be. And I just couldn't get it. And I think it's kind of like given the space and time, I feel better. But in that moment, I can, there definitely are moments where you feel like, well, what the heck? I would like a hug. I'd like to,
And like I'm like a very affectionate human, and my love language includes snuggles,
right.
like physical touch. Um, and then from that to be my love language, yet to be touched out.
Hmm.
I mean, that feels confusing for me just experiencing it and saying out loud. But for you, when you're used to me being physically affectionate and hugging and snuggling or whatever, like then all of a sudden there's like that's gone for months.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
was it gone for months? Is that just my memory? What was that like for you?
I think for me, it doesn't feel like months. I feel like it was just like it was more of a intermittent thing, right? It just ebbed and flowed. It was peaks and valleys, to put it another way. Like there was times where it felt like, okay, I'm not getting any sort of positive, a gentle a hug or a kiss, whatever it might be today or at this moment in time. But then it would kind of go back the other way. So I think again, I wouldn't say it was months. It didn't feel like months to me. It just felt like moments in time that were
Okay.
kind of
Yeah.
sporadic. It wasn't all the time. And again, I
Yeah.
think sure in the moment it would feel tough, but then as I'd have a little space to sit with myself, like, well, this again, like I said, put myself in your shoes, and I'm thinking, well,
Yeah.
how would I feel if I was the constant, I guess, source for something else to feel better? And the solution for them is I'm waking up in the middle of the night. So I have to think through those, right? In the moment, maybe I didn't feel that, but if I would sit with it, I could think through like again, how would I
You could
feel in that moment?
reason
Yeah,
with
I could,
it.
I could, yeah, I could logically think through it, and then
Like it's you can reason when you have like the capacity to reason,
right.
right? Like sometimes having a newborn erases your capacity to reason, right? Like your resilience goes down and your logical thought processes go down because you are running on little to no sleep. Your like nervous system is all jumbled and fried trying to co-regulate with another baby's nervous system. You're navigating things you've never had to navigate before that feel threatening at times, like
Mm.
the health of your child. Like, and then with all of that combined, you have to reason your way through just needing a hug and not getting it.
Right.
Like, that's a big demand to ask. Like, you make
Yeah.
it sound like you went through it so easy peasy. Like, was it truly easy peasy?
No, I don't think it was easy in the moment. Like I said, I think in retrospect, because I was able to kind of sit with it and put myself in your shoes, and then we talked about it over time of how those that moment in time was for you. I
Mhm.
think that's helped me. If again, it doesn't feel as strong of a thing, but in the moment, yeah, I would think it was obviously very hard. Especially, but it's interesting. Like your love language is touch. I'm not necessarily the touch person, so that was, but it was an adjustment. Like the feel of like changing from like I'm used to you like like leaning on me or coming and giving me a hug or giving me a kiss or just being around me to not. I think that was probably the adjustment that was hard because it's almost like the inverse of like, now wait a second, I'm missing out on the thing that always happens, and it made, I guess the silver lining is it made me appreciate that more, right? Appreciate that, even as a person who doesn't necessarily associate with the love language being touch, it made me miss it. Like, not I knew that not that I didn't miss it normally, but like the fact that it felt like it was so far away at times, I think you kind of helped me appreciate it more, I guess I would say, but yeah, it was hard. And I guess to answer the question, in the moment, yeah, absolutely, it's hard. Just I don't mean to make it sound easy, um, like
Yeah,
anything, right? I think it's
an
just,
adjustment.
mhm.
As you were talking, another thing just came to mind, a couple of things. One of them is I'm curious to hear from you around what were the moments that supported our relationship in your mind? Like, what were the tangible things that you can remember that supported feeling connected and grounded and on the same page as one another?
Mhm.
Um, Throughout the hard times, throughout like the thick of it in the postpartum season.
Yeah, I mean, I think it never felt like it was like a one-sided thing, a situation, right? I felt like, if there was a difficult moment, you could express to me what it was. And maybe not the time, maybe it was just too much you couldn't tell me then. But I think the fact that it never felt like a you versus me kind of thing, it felt like at the end of the day, we're still trying to come to the final kind of outcome is the best for our son. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's a good motivating factor for me of
Mm-hmm.
feeling like the goal here is a positive one, and sometimes the steps to get to it are hard, and that's okay.
Yeah, there's a saying, it's not me versus you, right? It's us versus the problem.
Mhm.
And I've heard a lot of parents say that over time. And actually, just recently, a parent said it in a therapy session. They were raised to remember that in relationship, it's not you versus the other person, it's you together versus the problem. And I
Mhm.
think that's what you just described.
Yeah, and I think obviously there was also times where maybe that wasn't executed to the best. There was times where where it did feel like it was really frustrating, or
Yeah, there was definitely arguments.
right, right, which is normal, I think. But at the end of the day, I think the reason I come back to that is, there are arguments there; those are going to happen. But
Yeah.
if your ultimate goal as a couple or in a partnership of, you know, is to have the best outcome for your child or the other person, I think that's ultimately going to get you to the right place, because your heart's in the right spot. Maybe your mind
Mhm.
is getting a little frustrated, or maybe your emotions are hurt,
Mhm.
but at the end of the day, if you're both working towards the same goal, and sometimes the steps to get there are different for either person, and right, it's not going to be easy. I think that's part of it too, is sometimes you just have to, you can't prepare for that, I guess, as much as you would want to, right? You can say, oh, we're gonna work together, we're gonna partner up, we're gonna do these things, you can plan to do them, but in the moment, right, the emotions come out, the feelings, the the jealousy or whatever it might be, or again, like, I think,
Or the shortness, like
yeah,
when I get flustered, I get short, right?
right.
Like the niceties seem to go out the window real quick when I am in a state of panic or overwhelm, or like I feel like there's an impending doom or threat coming. And as somebody who struggled with anxiety and intrusive thoughts, like that was really hard for me to like quiet that and create space for the niceties. And it came across short, and you got the brunt end of that frequently.
Yeah, and I know that's tough for me, right? Because like it's like a, what do they call it, cognitive dissonance of like the person I'm used to interacting with, who is much the polar opposite of that at times, right? Of very
Mhm.
very calm and loving, and not that you weren't loving, but I mean, like, to go from
Mhm.
that to having a short response or kind of feeling like dismissed at sometimes, right? I think that's hard as a person. Like, you don't feel like you're being dismissed or like, just do this thing for me. Like, what? Okay, I'll help. I know that I need to
Yeah.
help you, but it doesn't feel good.
There's this like piece of me, and I say this to the moms I work with, and everyone relates to it. And there's this piece of us that's like, I don't have the capacity within myself to find the words and express what I'm trying to say. I need you to read my mind and or already be 10 steps into what needs to be done, right? Like there's this like oh like this there's I'm holding so much emotionally and physically that when I ask for something, it's usually far past the point of when I needed it,
Mhm.
right? Like that's something I'm still working on today is like asking for what I need before like I can't handle it anymore.
Mhm.
And then to have to like, okay, I have to ask this, and then I have to provide clarifying information or insight that I've already walked through in my brain, but he's not in my brain. So he doesn't know it's not his fault. But then I get frustrated that he can't read my mind.
Mhm.
It's very common. I still do this.
Yeah, yeah.
And I that is so frustrating for you because it does feel dismissive because it's like, fine, never mind, I'll do it. Like I'll do it. It's fine. Just like I got it. It's fine, right?
You're like, well, I don't know what I was supposed to do in the first place. How do I?
Yeah, yeah, that's a lot, and I know, and I'm sorry it comes out that way, and I know that that's like me working to get better, and you're constantly trying to understand like what can you hold. There's this thing called like the invisible load that we carry in motherhood and in parenthood, and oftentimes moms carry this emotional invisible load and the household load and tasks a lot more than our partners if we are in a space where we're home all day. Where if we didn't talk about how relationships are going to change when we bring a child into the picture, if you're used to one person having a specific role or job or task in the house to keep the house afloat, and now all of a sudden that changes and someone can't do it, and the other person's like, why isn't this done? Or now the other person has to take on all the tasks. Like
Mhm.
you are now mainly the cook in the family. Like I do baking and I'll make things, but if it involves meat, like that's not gonna happen. And it like you do the cooking, but I do the meal planning, right? And the grocery list and like conceptualize what we need to get. Like
Right.
we've had to figure out new roles in the home to help balance the emotional load that's held. And it's common, if you're a mom listening to this, it's common for moms to carry a ton of the emotional load in the home because we are our child's, like, typically their main source of comfort,
Mhm.
their main source of food. We're up throughout the night. Not that dads aren't doing it too, but there's this I mean, the baby regulates so much easier with the mom because they grew up inside the mom. Like they grew inside our bellies. Our smell, our heartbeat, how we talk, the cadence to our breath, like the smell of us, all of that
Mhm.
is soothing to them. And so we hold this and then it becomes like I just think it keeps piling of what we hold. And so that's a good piece to talk about, I think, is like, how did you navigate stepping into that emotional load and figuring out what you can take?
Mhm.
And have there been moments where you feel like you're carrying too much and I'm not carrying enough? Or like it hasn't always been pretty. Like we've had like frustrations
Right.
and like disagreements about things, but like when you reflect on it,
Mhm.
what do you recall?
I mean, I remember for a good chunk of, I guess, early on when he was younger, I think a thing that was hard for me was that I couldn't do those things. I think that was, and like
Couldn't do what?
eh, I couldn't provide the kind of intrinsic things that you just had naturally, right? He wasn't, you grew him for nine
Oh,
months in
for
your body.
him
Yeah, for him. Yeah,
specifically.
especially for him, I'm talking about. So I think that was for me, that was a hard thing for me for a long time, honestly, was of, you know, and I don't want to like minimize I guess make sure I'm not come across as like, oh, poor me. But like I feel like, you know, the hard part was like I wanted that connection too. And again, that maybe this where the jealousy comes in of like I wanted to be able to provide that calming energy or to be the person who could answer the emotional question, right? And I think that piece, I think it's just it evolves over time. I think as a dad, you know, in that situation for me, that was probably one of the harder things, honestly, was feeling like I couldn't be that for him. I think that was really hard.
So you couldn't be that for him, but you found ways to be that for me and the
Right.
household. What did
Right.
that look like?
yes, I mean, I was just trying to respond to the other variables in the situation, right? If it's he needs help with this thing in there, he needs you for that thing, but what do you need to help him, right? So those kind of like things that add up to
Mhm.
ultimately
Like
to
washing pump parts and
yeah, washing pump parts
feeding him with the
or going to
bottle.
pick up the milk or there's things like that that were,
Yeah.
that made it easier for you to help him. That's where like I could feel like again, the value uh part of that equation for me was trying to find those things. But that was hard. I think even as he's gotten older, there's, those moments where I can recall feeling like, I wish I was the person who could help him with that. And then like
Yeah,
that's
I wish you could breastfeed. Like, make
yeah, you told me that.
dude, like you do
You
this.
told me that multiple times. Um, but it's just like that like where it feels like, you know, you have to be cognizant of like of you or the partner and how they're feeling. And I can imagine again the pressure of being the main source of the emotional kind of calming energy, or the I'm hurt, come help me, mommy kind of thing, of like feeling like when it's me, like it's like, it's you kind of have to.
Yeah, this still plays out today, and
Yeah.
our son's about to turn 8.
Right. I mean, I think thankfully, like it's evolved over time. Like he's still, I mean, will tell me if he's hurt, but then it's still different depending on how he tells me he's hurt versus he tells you. Like if he tells me, "Oh, I'm
Yeah.
fine," he'll go off and he's fine, but maybe he isn't. And then that kind of that's hard for me too, because I feel like I want him to tell me that he really did get hurt, not just like have to feel like he has to be tough to tell me that. And I think again, I guess one of the main through lines of kind of the conversation for me is kind of the evolution as a parent is just you're constantly having to change and adjust
Yeah.
and react to stuff. And you can try to be proactive. There's nothing wrong with being proactive. I think you should be, but
And
you don't want to get stuck there.
and that rule goes for every facet of it. Like if you are listening to this and you're a partner to somebody who has just given birth, like, and you aren't usually the cook, like you're about to become the cook of the house,
Right.
right? And if you aren't usually the one who cleans up the house and picks up and like cleans the toilets and like cleans up the kitchen and does the grocery shopping and organizes the list, like you're about to be that person. And whether you like it or not, whether you're good at it or not, you have to do it because your partner, whether they like it or not, or whether they're good at it or not, they have to feed, take care of, heal, like navigate this season of life. And it's not, if you're listening to this and you've never given birth before, it's not what you expect it will be. I remember preparing for I was blessed. I took 12 weeks off of work. I stacked up my PTO and used my short-term disability leave and had 12 weeks of work. Not all of it was paid, but 12 weeks of no work, I should say. And in those 12 weeks, I was like, I had gotten these like decorated his nursery, which first of all, he never slept in. That was a waste
But
of
twice
time.
maybe.
He tried to nap in there. He never slept a night in there.
No, yeah.
Um, and then I had these like really cute like seashells that had air plants dangling from them. And I was like, oh my gosh, air plants, that's perfect. They don't require a lot of work. Like you just spritz them with water like once a week. I can do that. This is going to be great. I had like a to-do list of things and crafts I was going to do because I'm going to have an infant and they sleep a lot. And like I'll be home with all of this time. No, my air plants died. Once a week spraying those bad boys was too much. It did not happen.
Right.
It did not happen, right? Like it was not a thing. Taking the cute pictures was like a chore to like how every month I like took a picture. That was like the day's event. And it was a chore to try to keep up on that. Having the energy to do any of that between like nursing, trying to nurse, feeding, pumping, doctor's appointments,
Mhm.
all of that. It was just so much to have any capacity to leave the house and go grocery shopping. Like, whew, like,
Right.
no, to cook an actual meal that's not like shoving random pieces of food into my mouth. No, like, didn't happen.
Mhm.
And so you came in and you pulled that weight in of covering those pieces without making me feel like a slacker for not doing it. Because you guys, there was days where I didn't even make it downstairs. Like you would bring food up to me. You
Mhm.
would bring those Aussie bites, the whole container of Aussie
Yeah.
bites to my bed so that I had a snack to eat while you were gone. Like There's
Right.
like I don't know, like there's days I never even made it down the stairs
Mhm.
or trying to take a shower, like helping me actually have space to take a shower. Um, all of my showers I think ended up being holding him in the shower. I don't know if I took a shower by myself in those first seasons, but um yeah, like you held that. And I think that's a big piece for the relationships is being able to see and have pride in how you are showing up in new ways, in different ways
Mhm.
to support the relationship in the home.
Right. Yeah.
Motherhood is a beautiful journey, but it can also be overwhelming. Do you often find yourself feeling isolated, struggling to find balance, and yearning for a sense of identity beyond mom? Trust me, you're not alone. Join the Empowered Mamas Club, where you'll discover a supportive community of like minded mothers. Gain valuable skills to navigate those highs and lows of motherhood, reclaim your sense of self, and become the engaged and present mom that you desire so that you can create cherished moments with your little ones. It's time to prioritize your well being and rediscover the joy in motherhood. Click the link in the show notes and join us in the Empowered Mamas Club today.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, I guess when you think about the ideal form of showing up as a partner in those moments, right? You want to say that you're gonna, you know, be able to pivot and adjust to those changes, but easily, I guess I should say. But in reality, I think the friction's gonna happen. You're gonna feel maybe at times you might start feeling frustrated, or hopefully you don't get to resentment, but maybe you do kind of feel like, well, I feel like I'm doing all these things. Um, and you know, I think it's an easy path to go down. But the point of kind of for me was to not, I guess you don't want to get stuck in there, right? I think it's easy to get stuck in your head of, okay, I'm doing all these things and you still feel like you're not maybe adding the most value, or maybe you feel underappreciated. But I think, again, being open is key. And I think that's the thing that's always been hard for me, right? Of how I'm feeling and opening about what I'm feeling is not an easy task for me. And I think, you know, for better or worse, you understand that. And I think you can kind of adjust your response to me to kind of pull it out of me at times, right? I think sometimes there's moments where you had to pull it out of me, which isn't it shouldn't be that way, right? Ideally, I should be able to, I
Yeah, we
wouldn't want to
all
tell
have
you.
those moments though.
Right. And I think those when I think about those hard times, there's moments where it just felt like it does get a little overwhelming, right? Of, all these tasks that were shared before that are now kind of the bottleneck is me kind of thing. And if I
Mhm.
don't do them, the pressure of feeling like I'm letting you down, I'm letting him down, or, like I said, I remember vividly, like if I was going to work and I would have been afraid you're going to fall down the stairs and like, what would I do in the situation? How would you get a hold of me? Like, I would think about those situations, like, well, I don't know what to do about them. But I was like, give you some food so you had something to eat for this, so you didn't have to go down the stairs, if I wasn't going to be available kind of thing.
Yeah. And my healing was different than I think many. Walking was hard, right? Like I tore during delivery. I was sewing up and I broke my tailbone. I re-broke my tailbone and didn't discover the rebroken tailbone. We didn't connect the dots on why I was
Mm.
in so much pain, but walking was hard and our bedroom was upstairs and then having to carry him in my arms and walk down the stairs in that healing season was tricky. So
Yeah.
just context for his fear.
Oh yeah. Sorry. Yeah. And I think another thing that maybe for me that was uh, something that helped was I think there's a tendency to see I guess maybe the expectation of what it means to be a partner, or as a dad, what the expectations are there and what you think they should be versus what they are two very different things. And, you know, sometimes maybe not setting so many expectations for yourself and what do you think it is to be a dad, I think is important because, I think as a male, I think there's a tendency to kind of push your feelings to the side, right? To say, mine don't matter as much. I'm going to focus on everybody else. But then you kind of build this kind of, again, maybe that jealousy aspect, or you build that resentment, or whatever it might be. And I think being honest and recognizing that, you too should have, some emotional connection, or I guess, the soft side of things. I think it's easy to get focused on the masculine response to the situation is I'm just going to solve these problems and I'm going to go to the grocery store. I'm going to get you this thing, or I'm going to, I don't know, whatever. It might be just like random stuff that you feel like you can latch onto that feels like you're providing, which is not a bad thing, but sometimes it just feels like you then push kind of the emotional
Emotions.
side down and you kind of just become more of a
Which bubbles up,
right.
right? The resentment comes when you don't allow yourself to feel the
Yeah.
feelings.
Hmm.
Yeah. That makes me think of so I've been very candid on the podcast about my own mental health journey, and I struggled with anxiety, obsessive compulsive intrusive thoughts that presented like images in a video reel in my brain of my child dying over and over again all day long. Um, and symptoms of depression
Mm.
and just like isolation, difficulty like getting out of the house except for doctor's appointments, pushing away like time with friends, not feeling comfortable going to support groups. Like it was really easy for me to isolate.
Mhm.
And um, at my 6 week checkup, I uh, was not honest on that piece of paper about how I was feeling. They give you the Eidenberg scale. That's like this depression scale for the postpartum season to see if you're rating. I wasn't honest. They didn't look at it. I did ask questions around like what interventions, like what's this paper for? Like why do I need to do this? And they said it's to see if we need to refer you to therapy or prescribe you medications. And I didn't want either of those things. And this whole time, I never told you what was going on inside my head. And I don't think I ever told you what was going on inside my head until my podcast was coming out. And I was like, I think I should tell people what's going on inside my head. Um, what was that like for you, witnessing me shift and change so much, experiencing anxiety and symptoms of depression, not knowing about these intrusive thoughts, but
Mhm.
obviously seeing a change in my behavior and how I presented? What was that like for you? And then being clued in so late in the game.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the easy answer is it was hard, right? I think like I said, I could tell that there was a shift, there was a change that you were, but in my head, maybe if initially like you chalk it up to it's just okay, you just gave birth, or you're trying to adjust to all these different things that are new, and a lot of the hard stuff falls on you, and I think that's initially I think my response was, oh, maybe it's related to that. And, then as time went on and it continued to, be clear that there was something there, right? Maybe I didn't know exactly what it was. But I think I think as a human, you want to find something you can maybe attach it to, but I also didn't want to like point at it if like it may make it worse. So I'd kind of think of, oh, it's this thing. It's the fact that it's hard to feed him, or, just the concerns about just general stuff.
Just trying to justify it.
Yeah, like I'd find like maybe exactly I'd try to justify what it would be. Um, and if I do XYZ, then that's how I'm helping, right? And I
Mhm.
think for me, like when I think about it in retrospect, like I wish I would have been more, I guess, inquisitive, right? I think I wish I could have showed up in that regard of asking those questions. But I think some of my bias of I don't like to be asked hard questions about my feelings. So I tend to like apply it to other people, which is not good, right? Because I don't want you to feel unsupported, but I think in that moment, like I think for me, as like if I was feeling those things, I don't want to think about them, right? And so I'm trying to push them down. So then when I'm looking at you and I think about those moments of time, I would like start trying to find like these
Yeah.
other things that might be.
Yeah.
And I guess to answer the second part of the question of when I found out later, I mean
You remember finding out?
yeah, because I mean, eventually you told me about the intrusive thought thing, and I
Mhm.
think that was again that's something that's hard for me to wrap my mind around in a sense because I don't think I mean I've had intrusive thoughts about not the survival of our child, but like other things, right? But I think it was hard for me to put myself in that situation of seeing visually feeling and seeing him dying, right? And that's a terrifying thought, and you know it's not an easy thing. It was like I almost didn't want to think about it, right? Because I think I didn't, because knowing how hard it was for you once I learned that was something you're struggling with, like I didn't want to, I guess, entertain the thought that I could also think about those things. And I think like if I feel like I think it's normal as a parent, like you think about I don't want something bad to happen to my child, and I think you think
Mhm.
about it. But for me, it's like I would like run away from it quickly, kind of thing, because I remember how hard that was for you. Once I learned what you were feeling, and then once you kind of expanded on it in that podcast episode in the previous season, I think it helped me, I guess, understand better what you were going through. And I also felt sad because I feel like, like I said, I kind of like I was there. I could see that you were, having a hard time. And, my a way to make it better was to do those things we talked about, right? Was just to show up and make those other things that I could do so they're not something to worry about. Because I think that would help the most, right? That's what I could do to help
Well,
with.
that is helpful.
Right. Yeah,
It
not to say it
was
isn't.
helpful.
Right. But, you know, also I felt like I didn't want you to feel alone. And that's I feel like I couldn't imagine what it feel like to feel like you have all these feelings, these fears, and these thoughts that you are, in your own head about. And it's something
Mhm.
I know about. I know about being in my own head, but not to the extent of, our son, and
Yeah.
it's tough.
Yeah. Well, and I think it all started from trauma with his feeding. It may be before then because our journey around having children
Right.
wasn't, it was wrought with confusion and a lot. Um, but I don't know. Like, when I think back onto that, like, I didn't, I do not recommend. I do not recommend not telling your partner what you're experiencing. If your partner is a supportive human, I recommend sharing so that you can feel held and cared about, and you don't have to carry that all by yourself. And like, I feel sorry that I didn't share that with you. And I also have always wondered, and I've never asked this to him before this podcast episode. I always wondered what it was like for you to hear that being shared really to the world and you at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, maybe the assumption would be that I felt deceived or maybe like, angry about it. But I don't think for me, that's not the feeling I felt. The feeling I felt was, like I said, I guess sad probably was the strongest feeling. And then kind of, you know, regretful, and almost a good chunk of it was just feeling like I wish I could have been better, right? In that
Mhm.
moment. And it was more of a coming from understanding of, like I said, I know what it's like to kind of keep those emotions in check. So I could understand that part of it, which I think maybe
Mhm.
sometimes that is the hardest piece of like I said, finding out after the fact. Not to say it was, I want to say it was easy, but at the same time, like I think it kind of was like it finished the circle in my mind.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
like,
Like it kind of
oh, that's
not
touchy.
right. There was more more things I didn't account for that didn't fully understand the extent of, or the
Yeah.
depth of it. Because like, I
Yeah.
could see it, I could feel it, but understanding how far it went for you is a different thing. And I think, I mean, ultimately I would say I was thankful for it because I think it helped me better understand that season of life,
Yeah.
really. So in the moments I was frustrated when they were happening previously, because feeling like I was kind of like on the outside, but
Missing the very important puzzle piece.
right.
Okay, so my last question before we wrap up. And we're both going to answer this. What are three things that, why are you
Well, I don't
giggling?
know, three things. I'm nervous about it. Three things.
Better make them good. No, what are three things that you feel like have been foundational and important to keep our relationship intact and healthy throughout all that parenthood has thrown our way? What are three things?
Three things. I mean, I think the top one is patience. I think on either side of think of learning how the other person receives love, gives love. Uh, Parents. I mean, I think all those things are rely on patience, right? I think of just in general, right? I think we all say we're patient, but there's like a different level of patience. I think as a parent of, you know, just trying to navigate those hard conversations or those things that you feel very strong about and that person feels strong about. And the moments are hard, like in those moments, but then the patience kind of comes out, and you
Mhm.
don't just turn on each other because you didn't agree on something. It's kind
Mhm.
of coming back later and
Mhm.
talking through it, maybe when you're calmer.
Mhm.
So
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 patience.
patience.
Number two.
And number two is comfortable with change. And that's for me. That's very hard. I'm
As
not,
you wince your
you're right.
face.
And I think, again, that's not something that still is not, doesn't come easy to me, but I think being able to be receptive to change is a
Mm,
big one. I think, you know, I think what's the phrase, like, the only constant in life is change. And I think we
mm,
can say that, we can think about it, but I
mhm,
think being a parent is probably the one that kind of threw it in my face the most, right? I think in other aspects of life, it's easy to kind of put your head down and kind of avoid things. But as a parent, there's things you can't avoid them. You have a partner, you have a child that you have to go through with. So
Okay, so patience, getting comfortable, change.
right.
Number three.
Number three is not letting outside influences impact what you think being a good partner or a parent is. I think
Mm,
in today and even growing up, it's easy to see like social media what we see as what a parent is and what people
mhm,
represent kind of the ideal form of that and what they're showing is very different than what it is to be a parent. And I think
mhm,
kind of making sure you're not putting those expectations on your partner or
mhm,
yourself or your child, I think are very important because I think
mhm,
it's really easy to go down a kind of slippery slope of like, oh, I see all these people and they're doing all these things and their son is or their daughter or their child, whoever is able to do math at XYZ age, and it's just you can't, right? There's no happy outcome of trying to compare your parenting style or your child to someone else, right? I think there's nothing wrong with seeing that and appreciating it, but at the end of the day, I think the focus should be on your family, what makes everybody happy and feels good there, and kind of building off of that
mhm.
instead of
Those are those are really good, strong ones. Now I have to add to those. So
okay.
my three, the first one I would say is having emotional touch points. I feel like when that started clicking in my brain, when I was touched out, I wasn't about the snuggles,
Mhm.
right? Or when I was exhausted and feeling short, and just wishing you would read my mind, like I didn't see you, right? I just was frustrated and needed you, right?
Mhm.
Um, and creating touch points where we could actually see each other. So, like, I remember just threshold moments of like you coming home or coming into the bedroom or like actually looking at each other in the eyes,
Mhm.
not just frantic, but like taking a minute and truly looking in your eyes and seeing you,
Mhm.
right? Or saying hi, or like, I need help, and looking in your eyes and saying that. Like, that's a touch point. Like, when you slow down enough to see you,
Mhm.
um, that's, I think, a big one for me. A second one would be brave enough to speak your truth.
Yeah.
Like, it didn't serve me and it doesn't serve anybody to go through a struggle in isolation, and it doesn't make you stronger. It doesn't protect you. It doesn't make it easier. It contributes to this very sad taboo that we have in nature that we need to suffer in silence, and we can only show people the best side of us, and that's not true. And so I think for relationships, being able to speak your truth, even if it feels, especially if it feels vulnerable. So touch points, speaking your truth, and then grace, grace. When I returned back to work, there was a couple of years that grace was my word of the year. And I got a yoga mat that had the word grace on it. And it was holding on to this space of holding grace for you and your partner because it's messy, it's
Mhm.
imperfect. It's a journey where you're both learning. And like you were speaking to getting comfortable with change, you have to have grace for yourself. You have to have grace that you're going to mess up.
Mhm.
You have to have grace that you're going to be able to like be humble and recover and apologize and come back together and see the other person for being a human. You have to have grace for your partner who maybe shows up in a way that's not supporting you and is trying
Right.
to figure it out. Grace.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a good one. Like you said, I think focus on that human part of it. Like we're all human. We're
Yeah.
gonna have those mistakes and those things that are hard. But
Yeah. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this conversation. I know it's been almost an hour of us sharing and talking and having discussion of things that we truly haven't talked about before.
Hmm.
And so I am just honored to share this space with you. I hope you received some tidbits from our experience and wisdom, if you can call it that, that serve you on your journey into parenthood. And if you liked this, I invite you guys to join. I have a free support group running until June 18th, 2024. So for the next 5 weeks now. You can grab that link from the podcast show notes or the YouTube notes about this episode. And that's a space where we can connect and talk and brainstorm and support one another. I hope you love this, and we'll see you later. See you next time.
Thanks for having me on.
It has been an honor to share this space with you today on the Empower to Heal podcast, where we illuminate the strength you have within yourself to heal. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss our upcoming episodes, and leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform.